It's now my pleasure to present to you the Honorable Minister of Tourism, Honorable Benjamin Roberts, who will give us his experience of living in the Gambia. Mr. Roberts.
I'm quite intrigued by the presentation of Mr. Saho. Is it Mr. Saho? Yeah, succinct and to the point, and I think it has kind of inspired me. I'm very happy to be here and us discussing PPP. I think Mr. Baksure, I don't believe he's old. He's young and able and capable. And I think in 2011 we had the Economic Summit. Yeah, and I think that was where this whole idea of PPP and trying to see what we can do with PPP. I wouldn't say perhaps that was the first one, but it was perhaps a very instrumental time when we started discussing PPP. And I'm glad to say that things have moved, since we had that summit, even though I don't think there was one since that one. PPP, when you're in university, you learn all the theories that you can, but the beauty is when you're actually in the real world, beginning to actualize them. And when I left the bank and I joined GIPER as its Business and Economic Development Director, I was given two tasks at the onset. One was this country needs a national export strategy. It has to be developed. And this country equally needs to do something with the business park. We have spent over $750,000 US dollars trying to attract an investor to develop the business park, and nothing has happened. So I told the board, well, I think we need to look at public-private partnership. That's the only way to make this thing happen. And they told me, okay, fine. Convince us that that is the case. And I'm glad to say that that conviction ended up in PPIAF coming, the World Bank, and that was where this whole issue of the guidelines and everything being developed. But I'm glad that progress has been made. Now, my presentation, if they would ever get it up, decided to do a couple of things. One, to just give a brief overview of PPP. I'm not going to go into definitions because those things have already been highlighted. But I also want to share in my presentation the process that we went through in actually engaging for the development of Tropic. If people don't know Tropic is the big construction that you're seeing from traffic lights, Kairaba Avenue, coming to Senegambia. Once you pass the Total, in front of Lamtoro, before the football field, you see this huge complex going up. That is what Tropic is. It started as GT Board's aspiration to build a head office. Very basic aspiration. And when we sat as senior management at the GT Board, we said an investor in this country should give us $6 million. We have $5 million on the other hand. We put it together, it gives us $11 million. Let's put up our head office. Then I said, no. GT Board's head office, tourism, major contributor in this country's GDP, we have to go for something bigger. And there I said, you know what, it's time to prove that PPP can be leveraged for us to have something meaningful. So we wanted something grandiose, as they would say, big. We had all the aspirations. Did we have the money? No. Do we believe that it was saleable, it's doable? Yes. So how do we go about it? I said, let's strategize as senior management, let's convince the board, and we take it from there. Actually, for the sake of time, I would ignore all of this and just focus on the practical aspects. These are important, but this can be shared via email. Now, we first met as senior management, the directors, the various directors and myself as the Director General, and we discussed and we said, our head office, what are we going to do? And then I put the idea on the table, PPP. But the thinking at the time was, let us try and come up with a design, and then go and approach one of these banks. I mean, I'm a former banker, so I know the ways banks think. Finance for me is not an issue. You have something, you have a bankable project, somebody will give you money. So we discussed, and we agreed amongst ourselves as senior management that we needed to engage the banks. But then I said, no, wait a minute. Before we engage the banks, why don't we engage the private guy who should give us $6 million? Is he ready? Does he have the $6 million for us? If we need it today, can he give it to us? So I went to see the private guy, and we called him up for a meeting, and again, we sat as senior management, and we said, we want to put the head office up. We've been talking about it for so long, but nothing is happening. So we need that $6 million. When can we have it? And he said, what are you looking at doing? And we said, well, we're looking at engaging one of the banks, and we want to do something in which the private partner would finance most of it, but we would benefit because we would not end up paying rent again. And from the structure that we put up, since it's on the TDA, we would realize inflows by way of operational license fees, because every business on the TDA pays operational license fees. So if we quantify that, by the end of the period in which we'll be given a lease, maybe we'll walk away smooth, rent-free, save $350,000 was, I think, the rent. Abla, am I correct, 350? We'll save that every year over the next 30 years, and then we'll make from operational license fees about one point something million dollars. And he said, which area are you thinking? I told him, okay, let's go. So we went and I showed him the area. And he said, I might be interested. I said, you might be interested. He said, yes. So, it was fun. So we now decided to actually scale it up. So we went again, we sat as senior management, we discussed on certain modalities, and we agreed. So the next step was, before we waste his time and waste our time, the next hurdle to cross was the board of directors. So we did a justification paper to the board of directors and said, we want to do this project. At this particular point in time, and I have some documents in that flash, I would want you to perhaps ignore the presentation, but let's, maybe we should show the last page, the second to last page of the presentation, just to show you the steps that we went through to actually to actualize on this. So we did a justification paper to the board outlining everything. And I have a tough board. If anybody knows the late Charno, you would know that I have a tough board. So we actually had to, the person that was interested, we had requested from him to give us a cash flow analysis in terms of this whole project. We were trying to ascertain feasibility. We were just doing a feasibility. Is this sustainable? Is this thing doable? Is it practical? Will it end up hurting the investor to our benefit, or will we mutually benefit? So he did it. He gave it to me. I looked at it, and I had questions. So I engaged with the board, and I was asked to rerun everything that he has given to us, but we look at it from a cost-benefit perspective. So a whole Excel sheet was done analyzing the concession, the number of concession years, 30, the investments, the expected cash flow, the number of shops that would be there, the complementing businesses, because this complex, let me outline that here, would have the ministry, the office of the ministry, would have the office of the Gambia Tourism Board, has an underground parking for 95 cars, has a cinema complex, Hollywood standard, has a bowling alley, and a food court. Yeah, so and I would say it's over $6 million. And our contribution, I can say this because we've gone past that stage now, is $225,000 with the land that we have given. And I like the proposal that the point that was made by Mr. Saho, that PPPs are not set in stone. The contracts, there should be flexibility where you can revisit the contract if need be. And this deal was sealed before the issue of the parking lot came into being. Because what happened was we had agreed on just the structures, but we did not think about parking. And if you see what obtains at the village, you would know that parking would be an important component. We decided to go back to the drawing board. Why? Because we don't want Gambians to say, Fufu sofa de pull and parking the fanahari. So we had to go to the drawing board. And the thing was, this had to be taken to the highest level, and that was HE for approval, and it has been sealed. So this issue was like, no, the board was like, we're not going to touch it. But God works in, magical ways. So what happened was, at the time that we had signed, and construction was to begin. Construction was to begin in December of 2014. So what happened was we decided to stall it a little bit, and then I was appointed minister, I think September. Then the first thing that I took to HE was, we have this issue, we have this challenge, we have to have underground parking. So I had to do another justification requesting for an additional 5 years to the lease for him to recoup that investment, because underground parking for 95 cars is not a small investment. And it was approved and construction started on in January of 2015. So we just went past the 1 year. But the point here is, we did not have the money. And there was no way that $11 million would have given us what we are looking at today. And we wanted to make a statement in terms of the relevance of tourism to the country. So we had to go through various processes, conceptualization. That was when we had the tete-a-tetes internally. We had to have a partnership engagement from a funding and technical perspective. Then we had an in-principle notification to the board, went to the board, and it was a back and forth with the board until the board said, yes, we think we can support this. Then we engaged. The ministry has been engaged behind the scenes. I remember the first time we discussed this was in July of 2013. I was with my predecessor and then boss, Minister Honorable Fatumas in Nigeria. That was when I first showed her the indicative design of what we are looking at. That indicative design subsequently changed. And I must say that leaders have their own thinking, and for obvious reasons. And when I showed it to her, it did not include it did not cater for the tourism ministry. But he told me, look, Quadrangle, I foresee some changes there. So why don't you bring on board the ministry so that at least, well, okay, it made sense, and we agreed we had to go back to the drawing board and re-engage, and that was also onboarded. So we had an in-principle agreement on the project, MOTC, GT board, the private partner, engagement with the board, but at this point it was more of justifications and them, for their approvals in terms of the concept, the financing, the viability, expected benefits, outlining of the risks and the cost as well. So this was what I wanted to share with you this afternoon. Thank you.